Hi everyone, this is Diane, and I want to welcome you to our Smart Woman Savvy Money 2010 webinar series. 30 minutes on the clock and 20 minutes to reach, to teach, and reach and 10 to talk. Smart Women Savvy Money is a platform offered through Urban Wealth Management designed to provide women with the tools and resources they need to create the life they desire and deserve. Our calls are held the second Thursday of each month from 1 to 1:30 Pacific Time. We have a great lineup of webinars to show. Today we're hosting Jill and Leslie, and they're going to talk about managing our loved ones' care. But we also have some additional things coming up, and I'm going to just take a second to share that with you. So, of course, we have today's event. Upcoming on August 27th is Dodger Day. This is our second Dodger Day we've organized. It's on August 27th on Sunday, so a little later in the month. It should be super fun. There's new food options at Dodger Day for those folks that don't like baseball, and all the seats are in the shade. Our next webinar next month, Investing in Women, that will be Thursday, September 14th. I don't know how many of you all know, but we can actually make investments in women using certain mutual funds and, of course, investigating companies that are supportive of women. So that should be super great and allow you to learn a little bit about some different investment strategies. And then thirdly, or don't know how many we're on right now, Renee and I are both at some conferences coming up. The first conference is Mount St. Mary's University's Women's Leadership Conference. That's on Saturday, September 16th. We have a promo code that gets you 20% off, so do go to our website and look at that information about the conference. And then secondly, in October, on October 28th, there's the Women Career Conference of Pasadena. There is a promo code for that actually on our website in addition, and it's only good to August 15th. So if you want to take advantage of that, please do. So those are the things that are coming up soon. Just some housekeeping items. Our call today is being recorded and will be available for replay for all who registered. The replay link will be sent out after today's call. Also, if you have any questions or comments, please use the chat box, and depending on your device, it could be either in the middle of the screen or the top of the screen. We will try our very best as possible to stay on time. So if you want to continue the conversation, please feel free to reach out to me for additional information ideas. So I think that's it. We're going to get started. Today I'd like to welcome Jill and Leslie, and today we're going to be talking about managing your loved one's care. This is the third in a series of aging in place, and Renee and I thought we would do this because what we have noticed with our clients and our friends, and even with our own family, that as our family members get older, it's a little more difficult to manage their health care. And what we have been finding is, of course, like so many other situations, if we can be prepared in advance, it would be just so much more helpful if when crises and the 911 calls come up, we're better prepared at what to do. So today I'd like to introduce Jill and Leslie. I'm going to, hold on just a second, I'm going to unmute them. Yeah, I think.
Hello.
Hi, Jill. Hold on just a second. Let me get Leslie.
Here I am.
Okay, cool, perfect. Okay, you guys are on. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having us. This is Jill Love, and Leslie Peters and I will tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do. We started working together several years ago as the sales and marketing department of a continuing care retirement community. And we loved what we did, but we were noticing that we saw so many families who were coming in, especially the adult children, and they were completely overwhelmed. They had no guidance from anyone, and so they were relying on referrals from friends or friends of friends to find out what they might be able to do to help care for their aging parents. And so Leslie and I thought, why don't we work with these families and give them the personalized guidance that they need? So we went to school and got our master's in gerontology, which is the study of aging, and we started our own consulting firm so that we could work one-on-one with families to help them find the right solutions for their aging parents. And I also went to school to get my license to run retirement communities. And though Leslie and I don't do that, it gives us a much deeper knowledge of what it takes to run those retirement communities, and we already had an insider's perspective. But we also better understand the laws and the regulations governing senior care in the state of California. And so we love what we do, and hopefully over the next few minutes we can give you some guidance and some tips on how to best care for your loved one. And so the three main pieces of advice that we want to give you today are to be connected, be prepared, and be organized for what's to come. And I'll let Leslie start on the next slide.
Thanks, Jill. So most of the people that Jill and I work with are typically mid-crisis. Something's happened and they're in a panic. We don't know exactly who's on the call today, but you may be one of the rare people who's trying to get ahead of the curve, which we love. You also may have just come through something and you realize, oh boy, we better get our act together. So no matter what, it's important to remember that you can't do all of this alone, especially if you're living far from your loved one. So we've put a little basic list of people and resources on this slide you can see. Some of these may look very familiar and obvious to you, others may not. We want to make sure to highlight just a couple of things. The first one on the list is in that second line, the fiduciary. In case you're not familiar with what a fiduciary does, it's a legally certified person who can handle finances on behalf of someone else. So in situations where there are difficult family dynamics, perhaps a conservatorship is in place, or maybe your loved one is having a little bit of paranoia, having a neutral third party can be very helpful. The other thing I want to point out is the care manager, which is the bottom line on the far left. Geriatric care management is a really important field. Care managers are certified to provide ongoing oversight in terms of caregiving in the home. You know, they'll go to the doctor with your loved one. They will perhaps interact with the caregiving agency if you have one in place, and basically be a liaison between your loved one and caregivers and family members. This is, again, particularly helpful when your loved one lives far away from you, or if you've got a life that's full with your own family and work that precludes you from being available to your loved one in that way. So the bottom line is that the more resources you can think of, there are even people you may not even consider as resources. You know, perhaps a therapist, perhaps your loved one is really connected to their church or, you know, faith-based community or something in the neighborhood that they're really involved in. There are all kinds of resources that may be available that you haven't thought of. The community resources are very important as well. Things like Meals on Wheels and other senior centers, clubs, transportation services. These are the kinds of things you want to make a list and kind of amass your sense of who's available to you for help. And also, in doing that for your loved ones, don't forget yourself, because caregiving is a huge responsibility and can be burdensome in some cases. I have a dear friend who has been taking care of his mother who's got dementia and has seen to it to get her caregiving situation in order, and he just started to fall apart emotionally, and his marriage started to suffer, and he finally got himself the help he needs. He joined a support group for children of parents with dementia, and is also seeing a therapist to help deal with what was a really tumultuous relationship with his mother. So anyway, Jill and I both want to encourage everyone to take care of yourself through this process as well. Jill?
Thank you. The next section is to be prepared, and this is really the meat of our presentation today, because there's a lot to do to get prepared for your loved ones. And the first one is to get real. You may have read our blog that was leading up to today's webinar, and it was all about getting real and understanding truly what your loved one's needs are. And then also finding out what needs aren't being met right now. And then thinking ahead, what if there's a further decline? What are you going to do, and are you prepared for it? And so some ways to be looking at your loved one's needs are to look beyond just the physical or maybe even the cognitive needs. Those are the most common, those are the easiest things to be thinking about, especially when you're talking about your aging loved one. There might be some diagnoses that have come up recently. But also think about your loved one's emotional needs and their spiritual needs and their social needs. And think about, is your loved one's world shrinking? Have things changed dramatically in the last 6 months or year or 2 years? So those are some ways to be thinking about your loved one's needs. But also, it's important to get real and to get on the same page with your loved ones. And that may be really hard if you have a family member who is in denial. And that could be your aging loved one that you're concerned about. It could be, for example, if you're concerned about your mom, maybe your dad is in denial and is overcompensating for what you're seeing happening to your mom. Or maybe it's an out-of-state sibling who really doesn't see the day-to-day changes that you do. So if it's helpful to bring in a neutral third party like Leslie or me, or to bring in a care manager, that may be your best next step to start getting real so you can get prepared for what's ahead. You also need to start getting prepared by having some tough conversations. You may have already encountered these and they may have gone really well, or maybe they haven't gone well and you're putting it off until a crisis happens. But some common ones that Leslie and I have seen coming up over and over again are the topic of driving, for example. If you have a loved one who has a diagnosis, or maybe they're on a lot more medications than they used to be, or, for example, you have a loved one who has diabetes with neuropathy in their legs, and they can't really feel the gas pedal and the brake pedal very much anymore. You have some valid reasons for being concerned about their driving, but you may not know how to tackle that conversation. There are some people out there called certified driving rehab specialists who are professionals. They're certified and trained to provide neutral assessments behind the wheel of your loved one. So it doesn't have to be this he said, she said about whether or not your loved one is able to drive anymore. So that's one good tool for you out there if you need that. Also, thinking about home. Is home the best place to live, or is it not? That can be a really touchy subject because most people that we know would prefer to live in their home until they die. But unfortunately, sometimes that just isn't a possibility because of stairs or disrepair or dementia. And so you need to start thinking about what will our alternatives be if home is not the best option. And then end of life and burial wishes. Those are some really, really big topics that can't necessarily be tackled just in one conversation or even two. But when Leslie and I worked at our retirement community together, the average age was about 86 for residents moving in. And we were consistently amazed that there were so many residents who would come in and we would ask them questions about their end-of-life planning and their burial wishes. And so many people had not thought about it yet, and they weren't ready to talk about it. But the time is now. Please be thinking about it for yourself, but also for your loved ones, because it's really burdensome on the loved ones to have to make these types of decisions when you're also going through grief or other stresses. So now's a good time, or at least it's a better time to talk about it. And then legal documents are a big aspect of some conversations that you need to have. So this next slide shows some examples of those documents that you should have in place, or at least a couple of these. The first one that you'll see on the left is a do not resuscitate or a DNR form. If you were to go into cardiac arrest at the mall or at home or while you're on vacation, a paramedic is going to take all life-sustaining measures possible unless they see this specific paper on your person, or if somebody else is able to provide that on your behalf because you're in cardiac arrest. So this is a form that needs to be signed by your doctor, so you do need to be planning ahead of time for this. But it does say, I do not want CPR done on me, so please don't do that. Now, if you're in a hospital situation, this middle form would be more appropriate. And it's called a POLST, and it stands for Physician Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment. It's basically the same thing as a DNR, but it's more specific and a little bit more comprehensive, especially in a hospital setting. So if your aging loved one has a chronic illness and has been in and out of the hospital, or if they have been diagnosed with a terminal illness, it's likely that their physician has mentioned a POLST for them. And this would be included in their medical records so that all people caring for them would know whether or not to perform certain life-sustaining measures. The third document on this slide is the Advance Directive, which includes Power of Attorney for Healthcare. This is a document that actually is appropriate for anyone over the age of 18 to have. The good news is it's free, and this is an example of the first page for the California Advanced Healthcare Directive. And what's really great about this document is that you designate somebody to be your healthcare proxy or your power of attorney for healthcare. So when you are not able to speak on your behalf, someone will be able to direct the medical professionals to say, yes, she wants all life-sustaining measures taken, or no, she just wants comfort measures, but please do not perform CPR or intubate. So we highly recommend that you get this, and we'll actually be happy to send you a link to the California Advanced Directive or an alternative if you don't live in the state of California. And one more document that's not shown here, but that is really, really important for your aging loved one, would be to have in place a legal power of attorney document. Now that one would control finances and other legal documents, and that one must be done by an attorney. So unfortunately, you can't just download that, or maybe you could go to LegalZoom or something like that. But because we have seen so many complicated situations where these legal documents need to be a part of a broader plan, we highly recommend that you contact an elder law attorney, or if you're younger and you're thinking just about yourself, contact an estate planning attorney, because you may need a living trust or some other documents to really protect yourself and your future. But this is just a taste of some of those legal documents that you should have in mind. Another section about being prepared is finances. And of course, this is a webinar with financial planners, so we highly recommend that you talk to your own financial planners. And if you don't have one, Diane and Renee are good resources, but also talk with your aging loved one's financial planner, because getting old is very expensive. And you'll need to find out if your loved one can even afford to stay at home. Unfortunately, sometimes that just isn't even an option because the cost of living is just too great in certain areas or in certain circumstances. But what you might want to do is do some real calculations of the cost of living at home, like insurance, meals, transportation, housekeeping, taxes. All of that stuff goes into those calculations. And find out, does your loved one need to downsize or make other changes in order to afford care? And you may want to find out if your loved one qualifies for some federal, state, or community programs. Unfortunately, Leslie and I have found that one huge misconception is that Medicare is going to cover everything when it comes to senior care. And unfortunately, it doesn't. It can cover skilled nursing and hospital stays if you're recovering from, let's say, a hip surgery or from a heart attack. But Medicare does not pay for assisted living or long-term custodial care in a skilled nursing setting. So that's why it's really important to have long-term care insurance, life insurance with living benefits, or finding out the right way to be utilizing your pension or other retirement funds. So again, talk with your financial advisor to find out what the best plan of attack is for your future.
Okay, I can see that we've got about 10 minutes left here, so I'm going to keep this section pretty quick. Being organized, I'm going to give you 5 things to do, and they go like this. Number 1, you're going to keep a current list of your loved ones' medications. And Jill and I have a form we'll be happy to send all of you that has a lot of the extra information that needs to be included, not just the name of the medication. So that's 1. 2, keep the contact information of all of those team members that we talked about earlier. Keep the contact information current and accessible. Number 3 is to make photocopies of the front and the back of your loved one's Medicare card, any other insurance cards, driver's license, or government-issued ID, and any other important cards. If your loved one isn't driving anymore or has an expired license, be sure to get a valid state ID from the DMV. 4, if your loved one has an iPhone, you can program your information or someone else's as the emergency medical contact in the medical ID section. And 5th, keep copies of all those legal documents Jill was talking about online for easy access, or maybe even put them on a flash drive so that you can keep them with you. I know that was really fast, but fortunately you'll be able to listen to this later if you'd like to hear all those things again.
Leslie, do you want to tell a quick story about what just happened with your mom and why it would be important to have all of that organized?
Yes, if we have time. That a week ago, my 83-year-old mother had what they thought was a mini stroke. And my parents live in a retirement community, so the retirement community staff was at their cottage. My father had called 911, so there was a police officer, and then the EMT crew arrived. And my parents' phones were both going off. My father's mostly deaf, and my mother couldn't speak. So they were asking her about what medication she was on, and she couldn't get the words out. And so she said, as she was sitting in the hospital, she said, "Oh, yeah, I wish I'd had that list. They told us to put it on the refrigerator." And she hadn't gotten that all together yet. So that would have been a tremendous help to everyone who was dealing with her at that time, because there was so much commotion. She couldn't think straight. So.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
There you go.
And that's our whole goal with these guides for how you can best care for your loved one, is to take some of the stress out of those types of situations. So if you can plan to be connected, be prepared, and be organized, you're getting a lot of those ducks in a row, so then you are ready when and if a crisis might happen. So hopefully that this has been helpful for you, and we would be happy to answer any questions that you might have. So Diane and Renee, we'll turn it back over to you.
Sure, this is Diane. So one question is about the forms, and thank you for being willing to share that form. But what about the DNR and the Pulse? Can you talk about a little bit about those and where people can get them? And if the DNR form, does it need to be on your body, or, if you have an EMT and you say you're at the mall, how would they know you have that form?
Mm-hmm. Good question. Leslie's dad, I remember, joked about wanting to have DNR tattooed on his chest. Then paramedics would really know not to do anything. And it sounds like something my dad would do as well. But yes, this is something that you need to have. And if you are at home, having this on your refrigerator, or we've also seen on the inside of the front cupboard underneath the sink, those are 2 of the most common places that a paramedic is going to look if they go into a home environment. But if you have a photocopy of this that you can keep in your purse or in your wallet, hopefully you might have a loved one near you who would be able to mention that. You can also get a medical ID bracelet that specifically says DNR, so then they'll be more apt to look for something. But a DNR form can be found through your doctor, or it can be found online if you just search for Do Not Resuscitate forms or DNR. But your doctor would certainly have that, and we advise that you have that in your doctor's medical record as well. And a PULSE, the physician order for life-sustaining treatment, this would also be coming from your doctor. Or if you're in a hospital situation, maybe it's a social worker or a hospitalist, somebody like that would be the one to be talking to your loved one about obtaining the physician order for life-sustaining treatment. And we do know that there are a lot of cultural issues surrounding these types of documents. I'm part Filipina, and in the Filipino culture, it's like bringing death on early if you start talking about hospice or DNR or these types of measures. And so we know that some people are going to have to tread more lightly than others, but we do just highly recommend at least having a conversation with your loved one to find out what their wishes are, and then filling out that advance directive, if nothing else. So then they have somebody designated as a proxy to make those decisions on their behalf if they're not willing to go as far to sign these types of forms.
Cool.
Hopefully that helps.
So, perfect. And another question I have is when do people most frequently call you, and when should people actually seek out services like yours?
Oh, boy, that's a good one. Most people call us, Jill, correct me if I'm wrong, when they are in a panic, mid-crisis, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's tough because, you know, if we all had a crystal ball, it would be so much more helpful in terms of when do you start this whole process. I think conversations done sooner rather than later are a great way to start. Once there's a diagnosis of something, perhaps dementia or something else, you know, COPD, you know, those kinds of things, then you know there's kind of a general direction things are going to go. And it can be very helpful to find out what are the resources, what can you expect in terms of, you know, how caregiving might ramp up, you know, checking out whether or not home is a safe and viable option, which is something that Jill and I can do, a home safety evaluation, sort of trying to line up as many ducks as you possibly can ahead of time so that when things start to kind of change, you have a little bit of a scaffold in place at least. Jill, would you say that's about right?
Yes, I would agree. And it made me think about a class that Leslie and I took in our graduate program all about end-of-life care and decision-making. And sometimes just starting that conversation is the most difficult thing. And then continuing with it is not as hard as you might think. And so some great pieces of advice that we learned were to maybe not take advantage of, but if you found that maybe your mom's good friend got a recent diagnosis, or if your dad's golf buddy passed away of a stroke or something like that, that can open up an opportunity to say, well, Dad, if this happened to you, what would you want us to do for you? Or you could even go so far as to get your own ducks in a row and create your own estate plan and then say, hey, Mom and Dad, this is what I've done, and I want to share with you my wishes in case there are any questions about this, and I'd love to know if you could have made any types of plans. So that's another way that you can broach the subject.
Great, thank you. That is excellent advice, because broaching those conversations is really very difficult. Is there a network of other professionals like you that can be a resource to our friends and clients and family? How do we find folks like you?
Well, care management there is an aging life care association.
Can you say that again, Leslie?
Yes, aging life care. It's an organization that.
Oh, you're popping out.
Oh, goodness.
Jill, take over.
Yeah, I'm gonna repeat that because I know what you're saying. The Aging Life Care Association is an association of care managers who can do the same types of things that Leslie and I do, but they also focus more on staying with a family on a long-term basis. So that's especially ideal if your plan is to keep your loved one at home with maybe some support services like some intermittent caregiving or something like that. But you would like to have a neutral third party just to help advise you when things might be changing and you need to get some additional resources in place.
And finally, I assume that you are working with other professionals too, whether it be realtors or estate planning attorneys or medical professionals.
Absolutely. There's a huge team of people that we can help families get in place. So Leslie and I think of ourselves as the hub of resources so that family members don't need to be spending hours on end on Google at night trying to think of all these potential people. We can just help create those support services, make those introductions, and then help you feel like you're more supported in helping your aging loved one.
Great. Wow, that's awesome. I think you guys have just been great. It's so, you provide such a resource in terms of helping people get organized from someone who's had to be in that position, and I think many people on the call have been. Also, you know, you're just kind of grasping at straws, and you, like you said, it's usually the 911 call that gets you moving. Yeah, I remember that 911 call. I just kind of, I left the voicemail there for a second because I was like, I'm not ready. Like, I'll listen to that voicemail in about 5 minutes. But because you do, like you said, your life kind of changes. You know you have to go into a different place, and you just kind of have to get ready for that. So thank you so much to all our callers. We'll get that information out to you so that you guys can have some of those documents at hand. And of course, if you guys can share some websites, too, that would be great also.
Sure, great. We'd be happy to.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you on our next webinar in September, Investing in Women. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.